Hello, my friends. Think about the last time you had a bowl of ramen. Maybe it was a cheap cup of instant noodles late at night. Water from the kettle, 2 minutes, done. Maybe it was in a proper restaurant, a deep bowl of rich broth that took you completely by surprise. Or maybe you have never tried it at all, but you have seen the pictures, the steam rising, the perfect soft egg, the noodles disappearing beneath the surface. There is something about ramen that feels simple, humble, just noodles and broth. But here is what most people don't know. Behind that bowl is one of the most surprising journeys in food history, a story that crosses oceans and centuries, a story of war, hunger, survival, and one man sitting alone in a small shed in his backyard, trying to feed the world. You are with me on Custom Stories in English. Find a comfortable spot. The broth is ready. Let the story begin. Let's start with a question that sounds simple. Is ramen Japanese or Chinese? The answer, like most things in food history, is complicated and a little bit political, and depending on who you ask, completely different. Here is what we know. Noodles in broth have existed in China for thousands of years. The Chinese were making wheat noodles long before Japan had any idea what wheat noodles were. Historians trace the origins of ramen-style noodles to Chinese cuisine, specifically to a style of noodle dish called lamian. The word itself, la meaning pole, mian meaning noodle, describes the technique. A skilled cook takes a piece of dough and pulls it, stretches it, folds it, pulls it again, over and over, until it becomes long, thin, perfectly elastic noodles. It is an ancient art, and it requires years to master. But here is where the story gets interesting. Japan has its own word for ramen, and for a long time, many Japanese people believed ramen was entirely their own invention, a uniquely Japanese food, something that grew naturally from Japanese culture and Japanese taste. The truth is somewhere in between, and it arrived in Japan the way most great things arrive, carried by people who were far from home. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, large numbers of Chinese immigrants and workers came to Japan. They settled in port cities, Yokohama, Kobe, Nagasaki. They brought their food with them, their techniques, their broths, their noodles. And the Japanese, who have always had an extraordinary ability to take something from outside and make it entirely their own, they tasted it, they adapted it, they added their own ingredients, their own broths, their own obsession with detail and perfection. And slowly, over decades, something new was born. Not quite Chinese, not quite anything that had existed before. It was ramen. To understand why ramen matters, you need to understand what Japan looked like in 1945. The war was over, and Japan was devastated. Cities had been bombed into rubble. Factories were destroyed. Farms were not producing enough food. The country that had once been one of the most powerful military forces in the world was now struggling to feed its own people. The streets of Tokyo and Osaka were full of hungry people. Not hungry in the way we use that word today, uncomfortable before dinner, waiting for a meal. Hungry in the way that keeps you awake at night. Hungry in the way that changes a person permanently. The Japanese government, with help from the United States, began importing enormous quantities of wheat flour. American wheat was flooding into Japan, more than the country knew what to do with. The official message was simple: eat bread. Wheat bread is nutritious. Wheat bread will feed you. But Japan had not grown up eating bread. Japan had grown up eating rice, and rice was scarce. So something else happened on the streets. Small, illegal food stalls began appearing at night, called yatai. Vendors would set up in the darkness after curfew, cooking over small flames, selling hot food to anyone who had a few coins. It was technically against the law. The authorities tried to shut them down, but people were hungry, and hunger is stronger than law. And what were these vendors selling? Noodles, hot broth, simple toppings, whatever they could find. Ramen, cheap, filling, hot, and fast, became the food of survival, the food of a broken country trying to put itself back together, one bowl at a time. There is something deeply moving about this. In the darkest moment of a nation's history, people gathered around small flames in the dark and shared a simple meal. Sound familiar? The campfire was still there, just smaller, just in the ruins of a city instead of an open forest. And then, one man changed everything. His name was Momofuku Ando, and he was about to have one of the most important ideas of the 20th century. Momofuku Ando was not a young man when he had his great idea. He was 48 years old. He had already lived through the war. He had already lost a business. He had already failed more times than most people would be willing to count. By the standards of the world around him, he was not someone you would expect to change history. But in 1958, he built a small wooden shed in the backyard of his house in Osaka. And every single day, he went into that shed alone and worked. He had one goal, one obsession. He wanted to create a noodle that anyone could prepare, anywhere, with nothing but hot water, in 2 minutes. His inspiration came from those post-war street stalls, the yatai vendors selling ramen in the dark. He had seen the lines of hungry people. He had seen what a bowl of hot noodles meant to someone who had nothing. And he believed with complete certainty that if he could make that experience available to everyone, cheaply, instantly, anywhere in the world, he would be doing something genuinely important. His wife thought he was wasting his time. His friends thought he had lost his mind. He went into the shed anyway. The problem he was trying to solve was preservation. Fresh noodles go bad quickly. Dried noodles take too long to cook. He needed something in between. Noodles that could be stored for months, transported anywhere, and prepared in minutes. He tried hundreds of methods, hundreds of failures, batches of noodles that dissolved into mush, batches that stayed hard as stone, batches that tasted like nothing at all. And then one evening, after months of failures, he was watching his wife cook tempura in the kitchen. She was frying vegetables in hot oil, and as he watched the oil pull the moisture out of the food, preserving it, changing its texture, making it light and crisp. Something clicked. What if he flash fried the noodles? What if instead of drying them slowly, he dropped them into hot oil for just a few seconds, letting the oil create thousands of tiny holes in the noodle, holes that hot water could later rush back into instantly? He went back to the shed. He tried it. It worked. Chicken ramen, the world's first instant noodle, went on sale in Japan in 1958. It cost 6 times more than fresh noodles. Nobody thought it would succeed. Within months, it was selling faster than the factories could produce it. Within a decade, it had spread across Asia. Within a generation, it had reached every corner of the world. Today, approximately 100 billion servings of instant noodles are consumed every year. 100 billion. Every single year. One man, one shed, one idea born from watching his wife fry tempura. And here is perhaps the most beautiful detail of all. Momofuku Ando lived to be 96 years old. And until the very last years of his life, he ate chicken ramen almost every single day. He never got tired of it. Something strange happened to ramen in the decades after Momofuku Ando's invention. It split into 2 completely different worlds. On one side, instant ramen. Cheap, convenient, eaten by students and night workers and anyone who needed something hot in 2 minutes. Sold in every supermarket, every convenience store, every corner of the planet. The most consumed packaged food in human history. On the other side, something almost opposite. A bowl of ramen that takes 3 days to make. In Japan, ramen became an obsession. Not just a food, a craft, an art form, a lifelong pursuit. Japanese ramen chefs, called ramen masters, dedicate years, sometimes decades, to perfecting a single recipe, a single broth, a single bowl. The broth alone can simmer for 18 hours. Some masters use a combination of pork bones, chicken, dried fish, kelp, mushrooms, layered flavors built slowly over an entire day and night. The noodles are made fresh every morning, the exact thickness and texture calculated to absorb the broth in a specific way. The toppings, chashu pork, soft-boiled egg marinated for precisely the right number of hours, bamboo shoots, nori, green onion, each one prepared separately, each one placed in the bowl with the care of someone arranging a painting. A great bowl of ramen is not fast food. It is the opposite of fast food. It is one of the slowest, most deliberate, most obsessive acts of cooking in the world. And people will wait for it. In Tokyo, the most famous ramen restaurants have lines that begin forming before the shop opens. People arrive at 6 in the morning for a bowl that will be served at 11. They stand in the cold. They stand in the rain. They do not complain. They wait because they know this particular bowl from this particular master on this particular day is worth it. There is a ramen restaurant in Tokyo called Fuunji. It serves one thing, tsukemen, a style where the noodles are served separately from the broth and you dip them as you eat. The line outside Fuunji moves slowly. The restaurant is small. The chef works alone. And food critics have called his bowl one of the greatest culinary experiences in Japan. He has been making the same bowl for over 20 years.
He has no plans to change it. And then there is the Shin Yokohama Ramen Museum, an entire museum dedicated entirely to ramen. It opened in 1994 and recreates the atmosphere of post-war Japan, the dark streets, the small stalls, the smell of broth in the night air. Inside, 8 ramen restaurants from across Japan serve their regional specialties. People travel from across the country to eat there, because here is something most people outside Japan don't realize. Ramen is not one thing. Every region of Japan has its own ramen. Sapporo ramen is rich and hearty with miso, designed for the brutal northern winters. Hakata ramen from Fukuoka is milky white tonkotsu, pork bone broth so thick it coats the back of a spoon. Tokyo ramen is lighter, more delicate, built on soy sauce and chicken. Kyoto ramen is deep and dark, intensely savory. Same name, completely different soul. A Japanese person from Sapporo and a Japanese person from Fukuoka might argue passionately about which ramen is real ramen. The way Italians argue about pasta, the way Americans argue about barbecue. Food does that. It becomes identity. It becomes pride. It becomes something worth defending. And ramen, this humble bowl of noodles that began as street food for the desperate and the hungry, became one of the most beloved and fiercely debated foods in the world.
Let's come back to the beginning. That bowl of ramen in front of you. Maybe it is instant noodles. Maybe it is something you made yourself. Maybe it is a memory. A bowl you ate once somewhere in a small restaurant late at night when you were tired and hungry and it was exactly what you needed. Whatever it is, it carries more history than it looks. In that bowl is China. Thousands of years of noodle making, hands pulling dough into silk, an ancient technique that crossed the sea and found a new home. In that bowl is Japan, the port cities and the immigrants who brought their food with them, the chefs who took something foreign and made it entirely their own, the obsessive masters who spent 30 years perfecting a single broth. In that bowl is war, the dark streets of post-war Tokyo, the illegal food stalls burning in the night, the hungry people who just needed something hot and filling and human. In that bowl is one man in a shed, working alone, failing every day, watching his wife fry tempura, and then, one evening, understanding something that would feed 100 billion people a year for generations to come. In that bowl is patience and creativity and the stubborn human refusal to accept that things cannot be better than they are. Ramen did not begin as a sophisticated food. It began as survival. It began as the cheapest possible thing you could put in front of a hungry person and call a meal. And from that humble beginning, through the hands of immigrants and street vendors and obsessive chefs and one tireless inventor, it became something extraordinary. That is the story of ramen. But it is also, in a quiet way, the story of almost everything humans have ever made. We take what we have, we work with it, we pass it on. And somewhere along the way, if we are patient enough, if we care enough, something ordinary becomes something beautiful. And you, my friend, you are doing exactly that right now. Learning English is like making ramen. At the beginning, the ingredients feel unfamiliar. The words don't combine the way you expect. The broth doesn't taste right yet. You follow the recipe, but something is missing. You try again. You adjust. You taste. You try again. That is exactly what Momofuku Ando did in that small wooden shed. He didn't succeed on the first try, or the 10th, or the 50th. He just kept going back into the shed every single day, because he believed that if he kept working, kept trying, eventually something would click. And one day it did. Every sentence you understand today, that is your broth getting richer. Every story you follow all the way to the end, that is your bowl getting closer to ready. You are building something, slowly, patiently, one word at a time. And just like ramen, the longer you let it simmer, the better it gets. Keep going, my friend. Your bowl is almost ready.